United Nations Secretary General António Guterres is set to address the joint G20 sherpas finance and central governors meeting in Sandton, that's in Johannesburg. Guterres will also meet International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola later today in the capital. Watching developments for us in Sandton is Khayelihle Khumalo, who joins us now live. And Khayelihle, what a time, of course, for the UN head to be visiting South Africa. I imagine part of his engagement with the minister later on this afternoon will have to reflect on the conflicts that we're seeing around the world, no less the ongoing war in Gaza.
Well, certainly, and as you know that Mr. Guterres has really been vocal about these conflicts and calling for the ceasefire. I mean, you go back to the recent summit in Rio and Brazil where the G20 leaders were meeting. So he spoke about really the ceasefires from Lebanon to Sudan and all many other countries as well that are battling with conflicts. But also something that we do understand will feature prominently will be South Africa's priorities during the course of its G20 presidency. Issues around, of course, global solidarity, but also issues around as well sustainability. He has been quite vocal around sustainable development, but also a very critical issue and climate change as well. The UN boss has been very outspoken about all these issues, really, especially around climate change, the ramifications that you have seen. I mean, it's been quite interesting during the course of these meetings since Monday, and where you had the International Relations and Cooperation Minister Lamola saying to the delegates, you're coming here in South Africa, especially in the economic hub here in Johannesburg, amid the scorcher where we've seen the heat wave after heat wave, really just pointing to the issues around climate change. But of course, we do understand that Mr. Guterres has always been a friend of South Africa, and you'll remember at the time when he was declared as a persona non grata by the Israeli authorities, South Africa rallied behind him. But also South Africa has always been supportive of his initiatives, whether you're looking at the Pact for the Future, where they talk about the array of the global challenges from the current situation at the UN Security Council itself, where there's so much talking about the reforms for this key institution, but also issues around the reforms around the financial architecture. So he's been very vocal as well, saying that it must be reformed to reflect the current realities. But we do understand that during the course of his visit as well, Mr. Guterres will go to Lesotho as well, where he's going to meet the King of Lesotho and Prime Minister Matekane as well. And as you know, that Lesotho as well is one of those countries bearing the brunt of climate change. So there's quite a lot to be done by the UN boss.
Absolutely. When Ronald Lamola spoke a couple of days ago, Khayelihle, he also mentioned that part of what South Africa wants to do during its presidency of the G20 is strengthen multilateral institutions. I imagine the UN head will have a lot to say about that.
Well, very much so, and especially where we've seen quite a number of elections where there's almost a rise of the right-wingers, the rise of unilateralism. So these are very challenging times for multilateralism. So I do understand the UN boss may touch on that particular issue as well, but also just in terms of the key responsibility for the G20 members. Once again, making reference to the G20 in Brazil, Mr. Guterres stated categorically that the G20 countries are very powerful nations, so they must use their economic clout in leading, really in addressing the global challenges, whether you're looking at the conflicts, issues, also the geopolitical shifts as well, but also really just in terms of a number of issues, especially in the global south, especially underscoring South Africa's role. As you know, that post South Africa's G20 presidency, it's going to go back to what is known as the global north in the United States of America, where South Africa will have a handover. But of course, I mean, there's a great deal of excitement in Sandton. The delegates are quite cheerful. And in fact, a short while ago, we had from South Africa's G20 Sherpa, Zane Dango, who's also the Director General within the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, where you are speaking about the role that they are going to play as sherpas in terms of making sure that they consolidate the agenda, they get all the issues so that, obviously the big summits next year is not really just derailed by the geopolitical issues, really just learning from what the Brazilians have done, what the Indians have done. But also a very important moment for the African continent. I mean, this is going to be the first G20 right in the African continent, especially with the inclusion of the African Union. And we saw those major developments in Delhi in 2023. So it's going to be a very interesting time, really, to see how will South Africa amplify the voice of the global South countries, but also making sure that they showcase the country's beauty. It's also about tourism. It's about inclusion of so many parties, the civil society, but also the township economy as well.